He's the one that's going to go to Butler? Okay. Okay, very good.
Another section. Okay, yeah, but literally it was just like from the Jewish Journal, and it's like,
Hi, I'm Graham. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Hi, Betsy. I'm Graham. So nice.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we're gonna find our seat so we can begin. It's also being streamed, so we're excited that those who are not present will be able to hear this conversation. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Rabbi Erez Sherman, one of the senior rabbis here at Sinai Temple, and I feel like it was yesterday that we were here with one extra, Coach Bob McKillop of Davidson. There's so many intersections between the three of us, but I do want to read something to you to begin. It's a Facebook message in 2018, and it is, give me one moment, to somebody I found on Facebook, and his name was Alex Kor. It said this, September 15th. Dear Alex, this is Rabbi Erez Sherman of Sinai Temple in Los Angeles. I am writing my Kol Nidre sermon about forgiveness. I came across your mother's letter of a forgiveness story. I am truly blown away by this story, and I need to share this with my congregation. I will send it to you upon completion. May you go from strength to strength. If you know Alex, before you're done with the Facebook message, he writes back. He said, thank you. You showed me the story of your mom, the story of Eva.com, the documentary. And from there, we took it from there. A couple of years ago, when the book Unbracketed came out, written by Graham, and I forgot the co-author.
Jerry Logan.
Jerry Logan.
Yes, Jerry Logan, about college basketball and the success that smaller Catholic universities have. Or he wrote about the Davidson School when they brought Eva Kor, or brought the Davidson basketball program to Auschwitz in 2018. And from there, we have stayed connected. Alex was featured in the Jewish Journal this week. You haven't seen it. And now this book, A Blessing, Not a Burden. If you have not had a chance to get it, please do. And Mike, right? Mike Schaefer from Pegasus Productions. Pegasus Productions. Pictures, sorry, from Indiana. is making this story into a major motion picture. So we're really excited that this story will be told. So I have a gazillion questions, but I'll just ask a few to begin. Let's first start, if people don't know, we're going to start with Graham. Graham is not Jewish, from Indiana, director of development of athletics at Butler University. If I wasn't a rabbi, I would be in your shoes. He's connected me to the most amazing people, specifically Sister Jean in Loyola, Chicago. And just tell us how you first came across Eva Kor and how you, as somebody who's not Jewish, became fascinated with sharing her story.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a great honor being back here. You have one of the great rabbis in the country. He's have so much admiration for him. Got to go to your service yesterday, and
I'm sorry, it was very long.
Yeah, that's okay. We had a red eye tonight, so we made sure that we're no. But great honor for us to be here. And I first met Alex about 10 years ago. When you're in fundraising, they give you a big list of names, and they say, go out and talk to these people and try to get a check from them. And I'm still waiting for Alex to give me one. But we connected that evening, and I knew a little bit about his mother, Eva, and we formed a bond that night. I learned a lot about his mother and her incredible story of surviving Auschwitz and being a Mengele twin and ultimately coming to this forgiveness. But I also learned a lot about his father, Mickey, who survived multiple camps and narrowly escaped death. And as our friendship formed, we became very close friends, but also did a lot of work to honor his parents' legacies through education. We created a scholarship in his mother's name at Butler. We worked with a documentary filmmaker friend of ours. And then, long story short, last summer, hasn't been that long ago, summer of 2023, Alex had been telling me for years about how he was going to write this book about his story. And I said, look, I'm tired of this. We're either going to write it or you're going to quit saying it. And I would say after October 7th, we had an urgency to get the story out, and we're really motivated to do it. And I appreciate Alex having me up here too. When we began the lecture circuit, I said, look, it's your story, your family's story. But he said, I think you need to be up here because you bring a non-Jewish perspective. And so again, it's been an honor for me to meet these two guys and be with you today.
And so Alex, just take us back for a few moments. Your mother's story is well known, grew up in a very small town in Hungary with not many Jews, sort of a bucolic farm town, if you wish. Is taken later in the war, parents are killed, but maybe take us through that Mengele piece where she's a twin and perhaps survived because of that, but also really went through a lot of trauma.
So there's no doubt that she survived because she was a twin. The second she gets to Auschwitz, cattle cars open, selection platform, her dad disappears in the crowd, her two older sisters disappear in the crowd, and there she is on the selection platform holding her mom's hand, and my aunt, an identical twin, holding my grandmother's hand. Nazis running up and down the selection platform yelling, twins, twins, in German. My mom and my aunt were dressed identical. Within seconds, they're pulled away from their mother. The last thing my mom remembers is her mom crying, screaming, and my mom would say that the one thing she regrets is she never knew that'd be the last time she would see her. Taken to a barracks, tattooed, and then they go to their barracks, and everybody, they're female twins, ages 3 to 13, and my mom said, what is going on here? And one of the older twins, well, you'll find out tomorrow. We're part of medical experiments done by Dr. Joseph Mengele. And my mom said, this is crazy. And so the next morning, Mengele comes in. They all stand like little toy soldiers. And this was May of 44. And within a short period of time, they're part of medical experimentation. They would be lying on tables for hours being injected, blood drawn. And the purpose of the experiments, people still disagree about. But if you ask any of the Mengele twins, they would say that they were being used to perhaps create fertility drugs so that the Germans can mass produce German race. And this went on until her, there were 3,000 twins, 1,500 sets, boys and girls, ages 3 to 13. And then on January 27th, 1945, they were liberated. And then ultimately, my mom went back to her village. And then we can talk about it, then her journey ultimately to come to the United States.
So I want to get into the forgiveness piece because when I read the book, there were two pieces of forgiveness. The later piece is the one where she brings the person from Auschwitz back to Auschwitz with her. But one of the other pieces is actually forgiving her father for not going to Palestine before the war. And that's the piece that I did not catch the first time around that we've spoken. Maybe share that first piece, that she had in her mind this opportunity that would not have led her down the path that she went through.
My mom was 5 years old, and she knew something bad was happening, and she told her dad, we need to leave. And he did go with his brother in 1939-40 to Palestine, thinking maybe we'll see what it's like there. He comes back very excited. His wife, my grandmother, says, no, how can we have two 5-year-old twins? And my mom from that point resented her parents, especially her dad, because she thought parents were there to protect their kids. And so she resented them to her dying day. But when she did ultimately forgive, she then decided to forgive her mom, her dad, and herself for resenting her parents.
And then just talk about your childhood a bit. Terre Haute, Indiana is not a place where you would think Holocaust survivors went to. They did through your father's story, Mickey, who was a pharmacist. When I look back, and my dad's here, we grew up in Syracuse, New York, now in Philly. But when I look back, a lot of the people that I was surrounded by in that sort of smaller city were Holocaust survivors, the tailor, the baker, and people like that. Why Terre Haute, Indiana, and your experience as a child of survivors during that time?
So I have to tell the story a little bit, but my father was rescued by an American GI. My dad was in camp 4 years. One of the reasons I wrote the book is I wanted to tell my dad's story, because nobody knows my story. People in Indiana didn't know the story. And my father, toward the end of his life, said, Alex, don't do that. Nobody will read the book. And I think the story is important, but he was rescued by an American GI from Terre Haute, Indiana, outside of Buchenwald. Ultimately, that led him to come to Terre Haute. A little anecdotal story for those UCLA fans here.
There's pictures in the book.
My father, in 1946, arrived in the United States. In Riga, everybody's playing soccer. My father hears about this game called basketball. On a good day, my dad was 5'2". And so he finishes high school one year, enrolls at Indiana State Teachers College, and he's very excited because the gym teacher is also the basketball coach. And so my dad goes to class the first day, and that coach, some guy by the name of John Wooden. Coach Wooden takes a liking to my dad. My dad was very studious, was a good influence on the younger students. And so halfway through the semester, Coach Wooden takes my dad aside and said, Mickey, I know you want to go to pharmacy school, but you're going to get an A, but I need you to take the class next semester because you're such a good influence on these young kids. And so they became good friends. Years later, I'm watching basketball with my dad at UCLA, 1967. He says, this is my gym teacher. So Coach Wooden would start writing us letters. Dear Mickey, I hope you're doing well. I have a new player. His name's Lou Alcindor. So to answer your question, my dad, after finishing pharmacy school, went to Israel to visit his brother, was set up on a blind date. And that's how my mom ended up in Terre Haute, Indiana. But you are correct. You know, my first language, which I was embarrassed yesterday because I couldn't sing, but my first language is Hebrew because my mom, when I was born in Terre Haute, Indiana, spoke no English. And so my dad learned a little Hebrew, and that's how I grew up. I have a younger sister. And things, for the most part, were kind of normal, but then 6th grade, kids would throw corn at the house during Halloween. My mom started chasing these kids around the neighborhood. The next day, we have swastikas on our house, go home dirty Jew. I never heard the word dirty Jew. So for me, it was, and this is 1972, it was a real eye-opening experience. I mean, you talk about anti-Semitism now. I saw it in 1972, probably not at the same level as it is now, but I did experience it on a variety of occasions. But it was a true learning experience. When I would go to Israel, I fit right in. And then when I would be in Terre Haute, I kind of felt like a chameleon. So, you know, I think that being a child of two Holocaust survivors, probably in Syracuse or Los Angeles or New York, was a much different experience than being in Terre Haute. There were 2 survivors and then another survivor that came later. Wow. One synagogue was bar mitzvahed in Terre Haute.
And Graham, what about your experience or knowledge of the Holocaust of the Jewish community growing up? And obviously, I'm assuming it went exponential meeting Alex and Eva, but what was that like growing up until you really experienced the story deeply?
Well, you know, one of the I look now at that it is a blessing. I moved to 8 different states by the time I was 18. So it's sort of a unique experience where I did meet people of all faiths and races and backgrounds. But, even in my shoes, I'd grown really frustrated, even probably more than ever in the last 10 years about the racism and bigotry and anti-Semitism. And I did learn yes, my work the last couple years with Alex, I learned so much. Even in this process of the book, there were things that Alex didn't share with me about what he experienced. But I do say one of my biggest motivations for writing this is I have 2 teenage daughters, and one of the biggest fears I have, and I know you all realize this, is the surveys out there, the studies that show how little young people know about the Holocaust. I mean, you have to understand, we live in a state where a state representative 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, brought forward a bill for teachers to teach the Holocaust in a neutral stance. We live in a state where 2 hours south of us is perhaps one of the biggest Holocaust deniers in the country, and he led the Charlottesville rallies back in 2017. Betsy here would know the environment that we live in. So I've learned a lot, but I've seen things from my perspective, again, not of Jewish faith, but have some wonderful friends who are Jewish that has motivated me probably more than ever. I mean, we see what happened in Amsterdam last week. And so I've learned a lot. I'm still learning a lot. Learned a lot in your service yesterday. Thank you for having me there. And it's been a privilege for me to, in a small way, to work with Alex on this project.
And when was your first time going to Auschwitz and that type of experience as well? Because that really takes it to the next level.
So this past June, I got to go to Auschwitz with Alex and his mother's museum, Candles in Terre Haute. They do an expedition every summer, and was just...
This past June was your first time?
Yes, my first time.
So the last time we spoke here, you hadn't been yet.
I had not been yet.
So you had written all of this and done all of this with Eva before going, and this June you went.
Yeah.
So tell us a little about that.
It was life-changing for me, and I think until you are there and experience it, I don't cry a lot. I wish I did, because I think it's healthy for you, but later that night, after coming back from Auschwitz, I called Alex at like midnight. I said, I need to have a drink with you. I'm having a very hard time processing it. So I had a lot of tears that night. It really hit me. What hit me were the displays, if you've been there, of the human hair and the suitcases and the shoes. So I had a really hard time processing it. And then the next day I was really filled with anger. And I was filled with anger because of the denial that is so prominent out there. And I just thought, how could anyone deny this happened? I would say, I'll wrap up here in a minute, but then we went to Latvia following Auschwitz, and we spoke at the Latvian Holocaust Museum, which was one of the great experiences of my life. And as we were lecturing, there was a lady in the audience with flowers, and I wasn't sure, what was going on there, but she came up after the lecture, she handed the flowers to Alex, and she said, on behalf of the Latvian people, I want to ask for your forgiveness because we didn't protect your family enough. And so that was, for me, an emotional way, in a good way, to end the trip, in that there are still really good people out there who care. But it was a transformational experience. And the night I got back, I'm like, I can never go back here again. And yet, when we got back from the trip, I said, I'm ready to go back again. I want to take somebody who hasn't seen it. So it was transformational for me.
And Alex, you've been there over and over and over again with your mom, and now without your mom as well. Maybe you can explain the difference between going with your mom and now having that, not burden, but that blessing of actually leading trips now.
Yeah, so the first time I went, I was 1985. We went with 10 Mangala twins. Wow. And I think in 2 months I'll go for the 80th anniversary. I think it's my 30th trip. The whole journey to go back there, the first time I was there, I didn't have textbooks about the Holocaust. My parents were my textbooks. And the first time I went, it was weird because I knew where everything was. And it was just bizarre. And so over the years, kind of my purpose at times would be to keep my mom out of trouble, and then later on, her health became more of an issue. And, it's tough for me. I have mixed emotions because when I go back, I miss my mom even more. And I think, we go to, there's a barracks there with her picture on the wall, and she would always hang out in the barracks, and groups from all over the world would come in, and she would give little impromptu lectures. So it's block 6, and I go in there now and do the same thing. So it's taken on a whole new meaning. I hope that I continue to at least give, her legacy some type of long-term lease, if you will. But I think that I serve a purpose. And, the one thing I will say that my mom died during our trip in 2019, and 3 nights before she died, I said, Mom, you're getting a little older. She was 85, and I said, I think it's time maybe you slow down. She says, Alex, slow down. Look at the world now. There's so much anti-Semitism. How can I slow down now? And that, to me, I never sat down and asked my mom what my purpose should be. We never had that talk. But for me, that's what I think of when I try to think how I can move forward with this.
And she seems a very tough woman. I never had a chance to meet her in person. Tough in a good way. I believe one time they weren't going to allow her to come in to speak and maybe share with what she said that day.
So my parents had this incredible sense of humor. In 1995, we had Nazi Dr. Hans Mooch was on the bus. We had 100 people. It was a 50th anniversary. They're not letting us in. We have a whole agenda planned. So my mom gets off the bus, and they said, ma'am, you need a permit. She rolls up her sleeve, and she said, there's my permit. She goes, look, 50 years ago, you wouldn't let us out. Now you won't let us in. The gates open up. And so, she would use that permit a lot of times to her benefit.
And so let's go to this forgiveness piece, because you just quickly mentioned in passing that this SS officer was on the bus with her to Auschwitz. At what moment in your life did she tell you, Alex, I'm going to do this in terms of forgiveness, and it's going to make a big wave? I know we have some children of Holocaust survivors here that might find it disturbing, if you wish. Yesterday I used the word controversial, but just take us through getting to that point.
It was a process. My mom's twin died in 1993. And through a strange series of circumstances, a couple months later, my mom was asked to speak at Boston University School of Medicine, and the professor said, well, Eva, maybe also you can bring one of those Nazi doctors to the meeting. And my mom would joke, maybe inappropriate at times, and she said, Dr. Michalczyk, where can I find one of those dudes? The last time I looked, they weren't advertising in the yellow pages. He said, well, Eva, you'll think of something. So the last project that my mom and my aunt worked on was for ZDF, a German network. And in the final product, there was Hans Mooch was a Nazi doctor at Auschwitz that was cleared of all charges. And so my mom, one of the things I tell people, particularly kids, is my mom was mourning her sister, really looking for focus in her life. And she thought, well, maybe I can help the other twins avoid the same predicament as her. And so she, through a different person that spoke German, she contacted Dr. Hans Mooch. Good news, bad news, yeah, he'll give you an interview, but he's not coming to Boston. You got to go to Germany. So my mom's thought was maybe he knew what was injected in the twins because he worked alongside Mengele. Maybe he could help the twins. So she went there with that purpose. First question, Dr. Mooch, what do you know about the Mengele's experiments? Eva, I don't know anything. I'm sorry you came all this way, but I have nightmares too. And my mom said, well, what do you mean? You have nightmares too? And he said, well, and his story is he helped save 20-some Jewish doctors. He refused to do selections. We address all this in the book. But he also periodically would have to stand outside the gas chamber, and when the last body stopped moving, he would sign one death certificate. He goes on to describe the operation of the gas chamber. Right? My mom was always a quick thinker. And she said, Dr. Mooch, in over a year, we're going back to Auschwitz for the 50th anniversary. You told me things that people in the world in 1993, and of course now, say it didn't occur. Would you come with us to Auschwitz in 1995 for the 50th anniversary to tell the world what you just told me? Without hesitation, he said yes. My mom came back to Terre Haute, very excited because she was going to have a Nazi doctor that would give testimony. But she said, I need to figure out a way to thank him. So she said she went to the local Hallmark store in Terre Haute, Indiana, looking for a thank you card. Went to the local liquor store. My parents didn't drink much. Nothing seemed appropriate. She kept on thinking, how can I thank him? I want to thank him. And then one day, she always did her best thinking when she was doing the dishes. She said, one day I thought, well, me, the Mengele twin, was just trying to survive the almighty Nazi doctor, the highest honor I give somebody is I'll forgive him for being a Nazi in my name only. And so she then went to her professor at Indiana State University and said, I need you to check this document, make sure there's no spelling mistakes. And he said, Eva, there's no mistakes, but you're forgiving the wrong guy. No, I want to forgive Dr. Munch because I want to thank him. So at the ceremony, January 27th, 1995, he says his piece. He does show remorse, but there was no deal made between Dr. Munch and my mom. He had no idea what my mom was going to say. And so then my mom said, to thank you, I will forgive you for being a Nazi. And I remember to this day, a reporter said, well, Eva, you've forgiven Dr. Munch. How about Dr. Mengele? And my mom says, no. I want to forgive Dr. Munch because I want to thank him. And then over the next several months, she started thinking, I have so much hatred for my parents, for me hating my parents, for Dr. Mengele. So she thought, I'm going to forgive Dr. Mengele, my mom, my dad, myself, and all Nazis in my name only. And so that's the origin. And then I could tell over a period of time, over the next couple of years, she smiled more, she laughed more, she enjoyed life more. And I firmly believe that extended her life for many years.
And so, Graham, now that you know that story, you probably knew Eva before you understood the forgiveness piece. I know the film motion picture is going to be about forgiveness. How do you see that part in what you're doing? And have you run into challenges when people hear that story as well?
I've seen the controversies firsthand, in circles in Indianapolis. I know people in the community who don't agree with, her forgiveness. But I became a pretty staunch defender of hers in that I think one of the great things about Alex's parents, it would have been very easy for them to live the rest of their lives at home and in solitude, and there's nothing wrong with that. But particularly Eva went out and championed, not just forgiveness, but adversity, resilience. I mean, she spoke all over the world until, she was in her 80s. I think for me, my hope with the book is that I certainly, the majority of us can't fathom what it was like being a Holocaust survivor, but I think all of us have someone in our lives that we're trying to forgive. She helped me forgive a family member that I hadn't spoke to in years. And I know there were people that she's helped save from suicide, who are contemplating suicide. And so I respect both sides of the coin of agreeing or disagreeing, although her forgiveness is often misunderstood. Alex always is very good about saying it was in her name only. And but my hope is with the book that it may help somebody who's really struggling to forgive. And we said this, and not to make this political at all. I mean, I think our country is sorely in need of forgiveness, given what's going on. And our hope is to continue telling that story with this book and with the motion picture and every platform that we can do this.
So the depth of forgiveness that I understood when I read this book was that it is not for the actions that the people committed, but rather so your mom, in her name only, could live her life. And I think that's the distinction between when people hear forgiveness, oh, no problem what you did. That's a distinction, you would say.
Absolutely. She was forgiving the memory. She lost over 119 family members. My dad lost over 80. She can't forget. I mean, it's not forgetting. And I get it. It's very controversial even now. But I think your distinction, the way you portrayed it is...
You put it in the book, which made me think that way.
But yes, I would agree with what you said, yes.
So I want to talk about candles for a few moments because, again, it's not ordinary that a small town like Terre Haute with 3 Holocaust survivors actually has a Holocaust memorial. But unfortunately, it's not the first one because Candles Part 1 was actually burned to the ground in an arson piece. Talk about your mom's dedication to starting something, who was visiting, and then I remember reading that your dad first didn't want to talk, and then all of a sudden he became the one who wouldn't shut up.
So we had a garage full of memorabilia, documents from the Auschwitz, things we've been giving. My aunt died in 1993, and my mom wanted to do something in her memory. The garage was getting really full, and my mom was in real estate, so she found a building on a major thoroughfare in Terre Haute. And the next thing, she says, I'm going to open up a Holocaust museum. And I was busy as a podiatrist. I said, okay, whatever. And so my dad was still working as a pharmacist. He retires. And so the pictures initially were everything was nice and neat with, Scotch tape, but it was very neat, but very grassroots effort. And then, my dad retires in mid 90s, and he says, I'll work there, but I don't speak about my experiences. Well, just sit there, and if somebody comes in, show them around. And then really things changed in 1997. One time a group of students came in, and they said, we're here to speak to Eva. And my dad said, well, she's out on a real estate assignment. And the teacher, my dad knew, he also wrote a sports column on the weekends. And my dad said, well, I don't talk about it much, but I'm actually a survivor. What do you mean, Mickey, you're a survivor? So he gave his first lecture. And then that led to lecture after lecture. And he would tell you, I don't talk about the Holocaust. An hour and a half later, he couldn't turn the faucet off. And so in 2003, unfortunately, one day my dad was there late and two kids came in. And my dad said, oh, you're here to learn about the Holocaust? Well, we're checking things out. And they had very short hair. My dad called them skinheads. Went around the museum within 2 minutes. Where do you go to school? We go to Ivy Tech. And 2 days later, flames were seen coming out. And their car that my dad remembered was seen leaving the scene. And unfortunately, as you said, Candles 1 was destroyed. My mom was very adamant that she wanted to rebuild the museum, the exact same location. There were some efforts to move it to Indianapolis at that time. My mom said, no, if we do that, the arsonists have won. And so they rebuilt it there, and my dad continued to lecture, and my mom continued to lecture, and Candles Museum has continued to grow. And we do have an exhibit in Indianapolis at the Indiana Historical Society, and we are in the process of finding a permanent Indianapolis location to partner with the Terre Haute location, because Terre Haute's Jewish community is small, and we want things to continue to thrive.
And just that list of people that were invited. I remember that whole thing that, here was your mom who had an incident in the Capitol building. I don't know if you want to talk about that for a moment. But then when she opens Candles to all of these people that wrote to her saying either I can't come or I'm sorry, presidents and governors, and talk about the impact that it made just in the national, international scale.
When she reopened the museum, we had to have some people from Michigan. We had a Michigan philanthropist that raised some money. But yeah, one of the interesting things was, and a little different than your question, was they had collected pennies in the original museum, and each penny was supposed to signify a person, and there were millions of pennies. And the next morning, when they're sifting through the rubble, the firemen are picking up the pennies, and somebody had this on camera. What are the pennies for? And my mom said, well, it represents each person that died. And so those pennies that are burned are in the new museum.
Oh, wow.
And so, but yeah, one of the things that a couple years later, I was living in D.C., and the movie Forgiving Dr. Mengele was being shown in D.C. at the Washington, D.C. JCC, and I couldn't get people to sign up for it. So I started sending out letters, and next thing I know, it's sold out. And so we had interest from, at that time, President Bush and some other leaders. And so it was Joe Lieberman's wife contacted me. So it was very flattering that we had so much interest back then.
If I can just add real quick on the museum. First of all, when it was burned to the ground, on one of the walls was written, "Remember Timmy McVeigh." So Timothy McVeigh was the Oklahoma City bomber and had been, was about 4 miles away, had been executed from the museum. Again, toughness, resilience. The next day, of course, said, we will rebuild. Now, Terre Haute, Indiana is a really small community in Western Indiana. And I don't mean to say this the wrong way, because I do love living in Indianapolis and Indiana, but we have a pretty rough history. The Klan, Indiana was the height of the Klan. The notion, I'm saying this from my perspective, to build a Holocaust museum in this part of Indiana, probably for a lot of people seems absurd. Next year, that museum will celebrate its 30th anniversary. More than 25,000 people have gone through it. More than 8,000 children have gone through it. And my point when I say this is that if you were supportive of her forgiveness, you were opposed, that's a legacy no matter what side of the fence you are. the education. And I think that's one of the more remarkable things that sometimes is taken for granted, that this museum in Terre Haute, Indiana is going to celebrate its 30th anniversary next year.
I just want to ask one last question before we open it up to some communal conversation. Again, it's Crystal Knoth, 86 years since then. We saw Thursday evening in Amsterdam, which looks like anti-Semitic incidents as Jews are leaving a soccer match with Maccabi Tel Aviv. Sports was actually very important to your family. That's why you decided to bring sports teams to places like Auschwitz to educate them. Maybe just talk about that connection between what we think sports can do today as opposed to what we saw on Thursday evening. Well,
you're obviously doing a great job with your podcast and all the people you bring in here.
Your episode's up there.
And so, I think the real root of the evil is hate and anti-Semitism. I think if you talk to the Michael Berenbaums and the Stephen Smiths of the world, we all know that Holocaust education will not entirely mitigate hate and anti-Semitism, but it plays a major role. And I think that, unfortunately, in this day and age, when something like that happens, I'm hopeful that what you do in bringing athletes and college teams to, whether it's Israel or Auschwitz, to learn about the past. A friend of ours has an organization, and her motto is, remember the past, protect the future, Stacey Gallen. And so I think that it's something that hopefully sports can be the vehicle to help, along with Holocaust education, to decrease the number of situations like this happened in Amsterdam.
And as a full-time sports professional, your thought in terms of, sometimes people say, no, sports is just entertainment. It's just, student athletes, but you have brought a new level to this. Your thoughts on that?
Sports and entertainment's a major platform. On the negative side, we heard Kyrie Irving a couple years ago, and I think, for us, we've been sending this book to, I just sent it to Coach K. Actually, I don't think you knew that. He got it. And sports is such a vehicle to promote unity, I think, in the world. And I don't know, I see my daughter's soccer team, and they're kids of all faith. We have African-American players on the team, Jewish players on the team. Bob McKillop had a great quote. He had a team, if you're not familiar with Bob McKillop, he was the coach at Davidson, coached a guy who was pretty good by the name of Steph Curry. And he had a team, I think a few years back, that there were like 8 kids from around the country, African-American kids. And he said, this is what the world should be about, this representation. And so for my role in athletics is, what can we be doing to instill in our youth, these messages. One of the things I'm very proud of is the documentary that was done on his mom, Eva
7063. Yeah.
There was an educational toolkit developed out of that documentary that went to every school in Indiana. And again, think about Indiana, where we live. Our hope is with the motion picture too that we'll have an educational component, but it's so important. And my hope is that my wife's been very supportive of allowing me to travel with this guy. I don't know if that means she wants me out of the house or not, but we've been lecturing nonstop. We have lectures throughout next summer, and we say, unfortunately, this book is very, very timely. I wish it wasn't as timely as it is, but it's very timely. But again, a real honor to speak with you all today.
So I want to open it up to questions, and please, Marcy. I'm going to repeat it for those at home too.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for being here again. I remember seeing the basketball team come. Is that right? A couple of years ago? No? Did they? Yeah, that was wonderful. My question is about forgiveness. I think it's interesting. Your mother gave forgiveness without him asking for forgiveness. Maybe you could shed some insight to that on that.
Not only did she give forgiveness without asking for it, Dr. Mengele was dead. And so she didn't want to continue to be a victim. She saw an opportunity that by forgiving Dr. Munch and then realizing the benefits that it had for her, she didn't want to stop there. And so, yeah, she saw an opportunity to help herself. But then what happened, and I didn't answer this question, but when she told me about this, I said, Mom, I don't think this is a good idea. This is not, you're going to bring a Nazi doctor and I said, no. She goes, I don't care what you think. I'm doing this because people in history books need to understand that there was a Holocaust and he was a Nazi doctor. So I think she did it a little bit backwards. Yeah, she wasn't going to wait for somebody to show remorse, because then she would have been a victim her whole life, because Dr. Mengele was no longer with us. And so I think that she didn't want to continue to be a victim, and that's really the best way I can answer it.
What was Dr. Munch's, though, response to offering that forgiveness to somebody who was alive? Was he shocked? Was he, a lot of these people sort of were hiding over the many years.
He was surprised, and really the best. Later that day, we would always, at a gas chamber, have a memorial service. And each person, these are people from all walks of life. Majority of our candles travelers are not Jewish. And each
Just say what candles, the
candles,
acronym.
Children of Auschwitz, Nazi Deadly Lab Experiment Survivors. My mom founded it in 1984. And so each person would then light a candle and say, I light this candle in memory of. And Mooch was in the gas chamber with us. This was in a gas chamber. And Dr. Mooch went up to my mom. He said, where's my candle? So he said, he showed remorse when he did this. And everybody was shocked. It was really surprising. Sorry. But so I think that if she would have continued to wait for somebody, she would have always been a victim. And I don't know that I have a better response, but Munch did show remorse, and I think the best way I can say it is he wanted to light a candle. This is a celebrity.
Oh, wow. Well, my name is Dr. Stephen Kronauer. I conduct an ensemble at the Los Angeles Children's Chorus called the Young Men's Ensemble. And we have a member who was on that tour, correct? Yeah. And we, through music, wanted to, we do tours always to learn and experience cultures and experience opportunities. So when we as an organization decided to go to Poland and to do this tour, I met a friend of mine who has a wonderful klezmer group called Mostly Kosher, and Leov, he's a student of mine, and I asked him, Leov, help me pick out some music. We had already sung a Ruach Elohim piece that was wonderful to sing, and he gave me a piece called Stiller, Stiller. It was written by a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old. One of them perished in, terrible, terrible situations, obviously. But that day, we met your mother, and we did a tour of Auschwitz and Birkenau, and saw the horrendous sights there to see. And my group got to the gift shop first, the bookstore and the gift shop, and we met this wonderful, person from Candles. And she had said, are you a conductor? Are you a men's chorus? I hear you're a chorus. I said, well, yes. She says, there's the most amazing woman ever, and she's here right now, and your young men's ensemble need to meet her. And I said, absolutely. And I heard more and more about who she was, and the boys just ran to the bus to get their music so that we could sing for her. And you guys came in a little cart. And I guess Ava had said something about I have to put some lipstick on to look good for these these charming guys, and we started singing Stiller, Stiller, and she said, "Get me out of this thing." And she came and sat amidst all of us and educated us all. And she wanted us to sing with her, to dream the impossible dream. And it was truly incredible. The next day, she passed away, and I had to tell the Young Men's Ensemble that she had passed. And this was in my mind, but the Young Men's Ensemble came running to me. We need to learn really properly to dream the impossible dream, and perform it in our last concert in Hungary, which we did, and we sent you the video.
Yeah, I have it.
So Ava's legend is incredible. Yeah. And how she educated all of these, this diverse little choir we have, about 30 some of us, how many we were? 35, yeah. And it was life-changing for every single one of us.
Stephen just learned that he's in the book, I think, when right before, and we tell that story. But one of my favorite lines in the book is, hopefully I don't botch this, but we say on that story, in a 70-year span, she went from being a prisoner to help leading an ensemble choir, still at the gates of Auschwitz.
So Graham, maybe Alex as well, as you said, you're going to be speaking. This audience knows, we get it, or these stories are driving us to tears. What other places are you speaking at that are not Sinai Temple, where people need to hear that story, and how do you get them in the room?
Well, we're speaking a lot. There's an American Jewish History Military Museum in D.C. There's a brick. My dad was a Korean War veteran. There's a brick outside the building. We're speaking there in January. We'll speak anywhere. We're coming back to L.A. in February to speak at the Holocaust Museum, L.A., and so that's February 22nd.
Any churches, any other faith organizations that, I mean, you mentioned the children in Indiana, which is amazing. I think they need that curriculum in the LA public schools, but that's for another conversation. But what does that look like?
One of my favorite moments of this journey was last Sunday. So last Sunday in the morning, we spoke at the largest Presbyterian church in Indianapolis in the morning. There wasn't an empty seat in the room. Later that afternoon, we spoke at the Jewish Community Center in Indianapolis. Very big crowd. There wasn't an empty seat in the room. And I think for me, that's the beauty of this story, is that multi-faith, we were at multi-faith locations that day. And, we're just, also, Alex is pretty humble for the most part, but but I'd look again at his life. He's very busy as a doctor, as a podiatrist. He doesn't need to do this. He goes everywhere, and quite frankly, he does a lot of it on his own dime. So to me, he's one of my heroes with what he does with his life. He doesn't need to do this. He stresses at the end of the book that it's so important for second generation and third generation to continue to do this. But this is a passion for us. Our hope is the motion picture. We're looking at Tom Cruise right now to play Alex. We haven't gotten in contact with them, but if you have a link, let us know. But we are...
Oh, yeah. Have another drink.
Don't. But this is, for me, going to be a lifelong passion. Again, I'm not Jewish, but this is a passion project, and I feel really privileged. If I have time for one little quick story, back in 2015, we had Eva Kor give the commencement address at Butler University. Very famous field house, Hinkle Field House, where the movie Hoosiers, the final scenes were shown. We had 8,000 people that day, and Eva looked into the eyes of the 1,000 graduates. She told her story. She talked about forgiveness, resilience, got multiple standing ovations, but she challenged our graduates that day. She said, when you go home tonight, I want you to hug your parents. Not just because they paid a lot of money for you to go here, but because when I, quote unquote, graduated from Auschwitz, I was looking for my parents. She didn't know at that time they had been executed, and I couldn't find them. And then Alex was sitting in the front row, and she motioned up. She goes, now I'd like to give my son a hug. And that was one of the great moments that I've had. So we've had this journey, and I hope if he allows it, he'll let me continue on the journey.
Yeah, I'll keep you.
Just talk about the hologram piece, because I think it's fascinating that books are not books to kids anymore. It's, TikTok reels and things like that. And so you've been able to now bring your mom's story. In Hebrew, it's Tchiyat HaMetim. It's the revival of those who have passed. So what does that look like, and how have you been using that?
So USC Shoah Foundation here in Los Angeles, Stephen Smith, they've created the hologram. This is 2012 or 13. It's a funny story. I'll try to make it brief. My mom finds out about it. I always thought that she was one of the first 12 chosen. I didn't know this until after my mom died and Stephen Smith came to Terre Haute. my mom calls Stephen Smith and says, Mr. Smith, I'm Eva Kor, and I need to be one of your holograms. And Stephen Smith said, well, Eva, it's very early on. It's very somewhat experimental. It's very expensive. Well, whatever it is, I need to be one of them. Well, I'll be traveling. Oh, where will you go? Well, I'll be in Washington, D.C. for the survivors meeting. Oh, I'll be there too. I was living in D.C. All I knew is my mom says, I was chosen to be one of the people in the hologram. I need you to take me to this hotel. So I drop her off. I look, I see, I think that's him, and I go to work. That's all I knew. And so about 8 months later, Eli Lilly Foundation pays a lot of money in Indianapolis. She's a hologram. She stayed at a hotel in Santa Monica for 10 days, filmed at USC. And that was a story I knew. And now to give you, my mom passed away. My mom used to have arguments with herself. The hologram was created before my mom died. So she would talk to herself, have arguments with herself. And so now when I lecture, a lot of times we might have a PowerPoint or a Q&A, but then we bring up my mom's hologram and I'll say, we have a special guest. And all of a sudden she appears. The first time I did this in Miami of Ohio 2 years ago, a lady almost passed out in the front row. But you can ask her anything, and just to give you credit, almost always one of the last things I say, Eva, what is your favorite song? And she sings, Dream the Impossible Dream, and there's not a dry eye in the place.
I want to tell you a crazy story that I don't think you know yet about Stephen Smith, and maybe you can tell people who it is after I tell you this story. Next week, there's going to be to meet our teens, one of the hostages who was released after 54 days in Gaza, Ophir Engel. Ophir wanted to go to the NBA All-Star game after he was released, and with the podcast and my connection with Ernie Johnson, we got him on the desk, and it was a beautiful moment. A couple of weeks ago, the people who were bringing him was this person named Stephen Smith. I had not known who he was. And as I was emailing Stephen Smith, I was reading your book, and there was a picture of Stephen Smith in your book. And so now he who did what he did with your mom is now helping bringing these young people from Gaza hostage crisis to LA. And then he sent me his story about the USCS Shoah Foundation. So maybe just share a little about who this Stephen Smith is. And I'm sharing this because when we tell our stories, that is the way that we put ourselves in the story. And I think that's an important point.
Stephen is British, and he's studied theology. And at some point he came to Los Angeles, and he worked under Steven Spielberg, and he was named the executive director of the U.S. Shoah Foundation. And his wife primarily started the hologram. She created it, and they worked at USC Shoah Foundation for many years. And I don't know if you know, but he converted to Judaism in the last year.
Yes.
And so I just got a text from him this morning, and he's going to invite us out to Palm Springs where he lives now.
Yes.
But he's an amazing person, and he's a big believer in what you do and what we do, and he wants to educate the world and hopefully prevent future atrocities. But he's a quite amazing person.
One quick add-on, when she did the hologram and the survivors were all out here, I think in their off day, they offered them all a chance to go shopping on Rodeo Drive. And Eva said, that's not my thing. And she ended up that day going down to lecture to a pretty Watts, and she lectured at a high school down in Watts. And I think that, again, tells you a lot about nothing against Rodeo Drive. My wife loves it. I told her all the shops were closed the last couple of days, but I think that just shows how committed she was to her mission.
And she told the kids, I too was behind barbed wire. I can relate. And one of the things, just as an add-on, they all had hoodies on. And when she came back the next day, Stephen said, well, what do you think? And she goes, well, I don't like the hoodies. They had torn jeans. And so the last night after they filmed everything, Stephen has a party for everybody. He got my mom a hoodie, and on the back said, I survived Auschwitz, and all I got was this hoodie.
So a blessing, not a burden. My parents' remarkable Holocaust story. 1 second, and my fight to keep their legacy alive. After the last question, a blessing, not a burden. I'm going to ask you to give us your blessing for us going forward. Yes. No problem.
I'm also from Indianapolis, and I'm a TV commentator. So not a lot of those, not a lot of our people. But first, I want to thank you because the Christian community has been unbelievable for Israel. And Board's Jewish Studies program there, which was the first one in the country. And we have an anti-Semitism, study of anti-Semitism department, and he said, Dad, I did it because of what you went through, because I want, people to know. And so I know about you, I've known about you for a long time, and I have one brief question, which is, from your mom's book, I really did think about all the people that I either hated or resented, and movements. And I really think it helped me do that. My issue, and I ask you personally to channel your mother, I have a hard time hating people, like people in Hamas who are still doing it. They didn't do it, and they're not dead, and I struggle with that so deeply. And in 2 seconds, could I have your advice for us? I don't know. I do. People who are gone and stop doing it, I can get over, but I have a very difficult struggle if it's still, they're still.
So my mom, it took my mom 50 years to forgive. And so I don't know if it's going to take you 50 years, but I think if my mom were here, and a lot of times when I don't know how to answer the question, that's how I think she would tell you, you need to give it time, because until you feel safe or until the Israelis feel safe, it's really hard to forgive or to put that olive branch out there. And I think that's probably the best way to answer that. Thanks.
Each time I'm with Alex and Graham, I want more. So I'm glad that you're coming back in February and we can continue this conversation. The blessing and not a burden. It's not the end of the story, but it's a continuation of your mom's story. Graham, what you're doing, you have a busy life in the world of athletics, but I can tell you not only the Jewish community thanks you, but the world thanks you. And we're excited that you both are spending time together, spending time here at Sinai Temple. Big thank you to Amanda Harrison, who puts every program here at Sinai Temple together at the highest level. There are books outside, exactly. Please say hi to Alex and Graham. And this is also streamed, so make sure that you share this with your family, your friends. It'll be on Sinai Temple YouTube. It's a simple click of a link that I know will open up so many hearts going forward. Have a wonderful day. And we also, of course, on this 86th memorial of Kristallnacht, remember those lives who were taken, whose memory continues to be a blessing. Have a good day.
Thank you.